Hey everybody, here we are, Bucky. We're at the end of this 10-session experience, which was the Flourish study guide. What do you think?
Oh man, it's been an awesome time. I think flourishing is happening, and hopefully it's happening in your life. We've really enjoyed this time together, and so many people in small groups and throughout the church, and even you guys on the podcast here, you guys are being blessed by spending time with God, spending time with His people, and flourishing is happening, and so we're really thankful for that.
Yeah, we hope you have some major takeaways from this experience. And as we wind down today talking about session 10, we're going to do what we always do. We're going to look back at session 9 and make sure that you really got every single nook and cranny of what that chapter is about. And that chapter, of course, is on authentic love. Bucky, I know that for you, and you've been such a stalwart kind of driver of authentic love, defined as service. I mean, I think that's what I see so much in the message of authentic love. In a counterfeit world, even a counterfeit church, where there's it's really hard to find the real deal sometimes. Yeah. And I love this on page 66 about how one great metric of an authentic love in your church or your community is whether the city has changed, whether communities and cities look differently. But you preached on session 9, and again, I think this is a very personal message for you. What do we need to make sure we see as we look back on session 9?
Well, I think that authentic love comes out of a changed heart. And we really truly can't love like Jesus loved until we let Jesus love us in that same way, that same depth, that same level. And so it's always an inward journey first. It's always allowing God's love to capture and captivate our heart at such a level that we're compelled to move out to the homeless and the poor and the marginalized, and even our neighbors in our neighborhood that are struggling. We're compelled by His love. And so it's His love flowing in and through us that allows us, because we can't do it on our own. We can't be the Good Samaritan, right? I mean, Jesus is the Good Samaritan who ministers to us. And out of that, then we can love others.
Yeah, that's great. Again, the inward journey is something that's so overlooked in the Christian practice. Right. If you're new to faith, you have to understand that time in silence, time in prayer, time in solitude to start your day or the middle of your day or at night is critical. And yet the fast-paced culture inside and outside the church doesn't often allow it, but that is the center. I mean, that's the place we lead and serve from. So that's critical and a great highlight from session 9. Let's look into session 10, generosity. Now, the first thing you're going to see as you look at the front page, page 73, is this session looks a little different. I mean, this whole first page is more like an outline than an actual chapter, and that's completely intentional, you guys. We hope as you look at this, you can see this is not just the church's idea of giving or generosity. It's not just some pastor's conviction about how everyone must tithe. This idea of generosity, greed, what do we do with our stuff and the things most precious to us is a biblical concept, beginning to end of the Bible. And you can see that through all these references. That's why we did that. We wanted to let the Bible speak. And there's really a theme throughout all of these, Bucky, that there's really outstated. And that's, of course, God's heart for the poor and the oppressed. Mm-hmm. That's huge. Yeah. And we kind of said on Sunday that poor can be defined in the Bible as the material poor and the spiritually poor, the spiritually bankrupt. Both of those are very intertwined. They're often connected. And yet, I love a quote from one book. It says that the surest way to transfer your wealth to heaven, to make an eternal difference, is giving to the poor. Give to the spiritual poor. Give to the material poor. Of course, there's so much more nuance to it. Bucky, what do you think is a big idea for us to capture from session 10?
Well, I just think, like you said, 2,350 verses in the Bible about money. Why is the Bible always talking about money, right? More than any other subject, I would say. Mm-hmm. Because money is always talking to us. Money's not neutral. Money is energized and animated. As a matter of fact, Jesus calls it a false god. And so there's a real spiritual battle around this issue of money. Yeah. Money is going after our hearts. Right. Money wants to take the God space in our hearts and become the God replacement. And so it's a spiritual battle for what's most important to God, our heart. Yeah. And so we can't serve God, this false God, and the true God at the same time. We can't serve God and money at the same time. We have to make a decision and put God first in that place. Yeah. And that's why it's so powerful. It's always talked about because it is the place in the battle for our heart.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's exactly what the passage Luke 12 is meant to do. As you do a deep dive in that second half of the chapter, embrace and meditate on the words of Jesus, speaking to not just a inner family dispute about inheritance, but really the heart of greed. What you said, he cuts right to the heart, and Jesus' words on money and giving and generosity. You see, there's only a couple times that the tithe, the so-called 10% tithe, comes up, and if it does, it's ancillary. It's kind of secondary. Jesus is always after a bigger idea, which is heart. Exactly to your point, Bucky, and to the really the essence of this session. So we hope you can see that. We hope that you can see that the generosity is a whole life deal. It's not just our pocketbook, though it's tied intimately to our heartstrings, our pocketbook. It's our whole life. For many people, maybe for even you, money's not an issue. You can give because you find yourself in a good position, but maybe time. Maybe time is the last holdout for you, because we would never be caught dead, frankly, investing an hour, 2 hours a week, babysitting kids at church. And that's a tough ask for a lot of people, is to be generous with our time, our stuff, our talent, and our money. So it's a whole life experience Jesus is after.
Yeah. We want to give all that we are to God, and generosity encompasses the whole life. Yep. And it flows out again that we talked about, that changed heart. God is a generous God. And so when our heart is changed, when money is not our God, that generosity, will let go of that stuff and give that to the poor and the hurting and serve others with our time and our talents.
Right.
And that's the evidence that this new life is at the center. The true God is at the center.
Yeah, and you give from that place. That's what we really tried to talk about in the message last weekend. You can find that online. But generosity and the kind of immaterial benefits, the peace, the gratitude, the stuff that it conjures up in you is a lot of spiritual, a lot of emotional benefit. But those things are robbed if we do it out of moral obligation or just trying to make it a pain thing. It should come from a more pure place. And there's a wonderful action item here, you guys, as you look towards the session challenge on page 76. Again, what we talked about in the message is that you could be generous with your time, with your home, with food. That's a great tithe. It's the tithe of food. To throw a party in Jesus' name, literally, to host people at your house and let them see that you're full of light, you're full of truth. And yet you could also give money to your local church. And that's a wonderful encouragement. Right here we have a great test. Give it a challenge. Give it a 30-day challenge and see what happens in your heart, in your mind, and in your relationships when you trust God with the things that are most precious to you. So that's the challenge. Don't miss that. Give that an attempt. Practice that. And then, of course, this is the end of the book experience, but, we have a little action item here. If you go all the way to the end of the book, there's a couple big ideas in the conclusion titled, So What? And Bucky, we really want to leave people with two ideas. Why don't you take this first one? That's particular to you. It's a great challenge for people as they think about flourishing in their life.
Yeah. The whole idea behind the whole study was, how does a heart begin to flourish in God? And as a result of a heart flourishing in God, we see the world differently. We see our time, talents, and treasures differently, but we see people differently. We see people through the eyes of God. And who's the one that God has called us to serve? God has called us to love with authentic love. God has called us to share, not proclaim, but have a God conversation with somebody in our circle of influence. So who's the one in your life that God's calling you? Because you're flourishing for a purpose. That is to bear fruit for the one in your life that needs to know the love of Jesus. And that's the ultimate outcome.
Yeah.
That we're on mission, we're bearing fruit, we're going after the one.
Yeah, perfect. And the second thing, as you go into the conclusion part of the book, is don't go alone. Life change, catalysts for growth, all of those things happen best in community. Go back and pair that idea. Don't go alone. Go back and take a look at the fellowship chapter. Having people that don't just have common interests with you, and don't just share common things, but are willing to see the best in you and call out the better in you is critical for having this be more than a book. And so as you get through session 10, don't just close the book. There's more pages here, and there's a great challenge. If you really are hungry, if you're a new believer and you're hungry for more of this truth, or you're a career Christian, you've been a believer for 3 decades, but you kind of plateaued a little bit, look at the end of this session and the end of this book, and we're believing and praying that it really lends itself to true, profound flourishing in your life.
Yeah, we've been blessed by the whole study. We're thankful for your faithfulness, and we're excited about the fruit that God is bearing in your life and so many folks' life that are going through this. And God's going to do great things. So thank you so much for joining us for this time.
God bless you guys.
God bless.